Tonight is a holiday.
Pesach
Sheni. So I would like to talk about Pesach Sheni, its significance. There are many lessons to be learned out. And then BaOmer, which is a holiday coming up next week. So there's...
Which is the 33rd?
33rd day of the Omer. So it's very interesting. I would like, a lot of what I'm sharing is from Rabbi Gedalia Shor. Rabbi Gedalia Shor was the uncle of Rabbi Nathan Shor, who was the rabbi of Congregation Sons of Israel where I grew up. So these are very right down the block. Right down the block.
No relation to Polish.
Definitely. You never know, but I met a lady who on one side of her family was related to the Chazon Ish, and on the other side of the family was related to Bob Dylan. And
Zimmerman.
To my embarrassment, I didn't go, whoa, the Chazon Ish. I went, whoa, Bob Dylan. So I'm still embarrassed about that. Okay, the pasuk, the verse says, BaOmer, let's see where in the Torah where Pesach Sheni comes from. BaOmer ha'anoshim ha'heima ilav anachnu t'meim l'nefesh adam lama nigara. So Pesach Sheni was for the people who were impure on the first Passover, and they had an opportunity to bring the sacrifice a month later, which is tonight. Tonight is a month after the 14th day of Nisan, the 14th day of Iyar. So these people were impure. This is how the mitzvah came about. It wasn't a given that the mitzvah was going to be a mitzvah. Meaning Hashem didn't just tell Moshe, hey, we're going to have a Pesach Sheni. That's not what happened. This is what happened. There's I shouldn't say fellas, there were people, holy people, that were impure. So they said, Lama Nigara, why should we lose out, Lavilti Hikriv es Korban Hashem b'modo, that we weren't able to bring the sacrifice in its proper time, b'toch b'nei Yisrael. Moshe imdu v'eshma meitzav Hashem lechem. And Moshe says, okay, let me ask God, I'll find out. So what is this taina? What is this argument that they were making? Of Lama Nigara. Why did we lose out?
Were they doing other mitzvahs at the time?
We will see.
They were carrying the body.
Right.
Of,
they were carrying the bones of Yosef. So in Rashi says here, the reason that the Torah wasn't given, this parsha wasn't given through Moshe is because Megalgal and Schus al Yedei Zakai. Because we give merits when people do mitzvahs. Meaning when you do something righteous, you get positive things. Positive things come out of doing mitzvahs. So the parsha came about because these people said, why did we lose out? Lama Nigara. So, first of all, what kind of complaint is that? Lama Nigara. They had a technicality, they couldn't fulfill the mitzvah. That happens all the time. If a person, God forbid, is sick and can't make it to Minyan, he's not getting in trouble for not going to Minyan. He couldn't do it. Would you say, Lama Nigara? No, you're not required to do that. Or, let's say there's a hurricane, so you can't sit in the sukkah. Would you say, Lama Nigara? No, that's the rule. When the weather is crazy and the sukkah won't stand, you don't have to sit in the sukkah. So why are they saying, why did we lose out? What did they lose out? That's the law. So, Rav Gedalia Shor cites a story in the Zohar, in the Kabbalah. It says like this. The Tanaim, they were the rabbis of the Mishnah. They were coming back from somewhere because they were involved in the mitzvah of Pidyon Shruyim. There's a very big mitzvah to rescue a captive Jew. A Jew who is captive. Right, like, what's his name, Evan Gershowitz now? If you can get him out of Russia, it'll be a very big mitzvah.
There are still 2 bodies unaccounted for that the Arabs had taken.
Really?
Only one of the 3 so far has been found.
Is this recent?
No, it's someone from the war, when the war
Wow.
finished, the Arabs.
So this is for, definitely good to get the bodies back. This is for live people. It's a very big mitzvah, and they were constantly, people would know that Jews would always redeem their brethren, so people would kidnap them. So these big rabbis were coming back from doing the mitzvah of rescuing the captives. So a little child comes by and sees their face, sees them, he says, I can tell from your faces that you rabbis have not said the Shema this morning. Okay. So the Tanaim said to him, what do you mean? We were exempt. There's a rule that says, Osik mitzvah pater min mitzvah. If you're doing one mitzvah, you don't stop to do another mitzvah. So these rabbis were rescuing a Jewish person from captivity. That's a very big mitzvah. So they were exempt from doing the mitzvah. So, okay, first of all, this kid must have been a very holy kid. If you can see in their faces what was going on, it's like something Kabbalists can do, the Arizal could do, could look at your face and tell you what sins you've done. Very, very scary stuff. I can't do it. You don't have to shield your faces. Don't worry about it. I'll definitely shield my face. So, what was going on here? Another story. This one's in the Talmud. We remember the holiday of Purim, which we just had. Who was the hero of the story? One of them, Mordechai. So Mordechai was on the Sanhedrin, one of the great Jewish court of elders, very important position. So the Megillah says, this is brought in the Talmud of Megillah 16b, it says, V'gadol Yehudim, Mordechai, after the story, he was great amongst the Jews, V'ratzai l'rov echav, and most of his brothers were very fond of him. So the Talmud, right, most. If you read the Megillah, it says most. So the Talmud makes the following
I never noticed that.
inference. So I need the Talmud. No. I wouldn't have noticed it either. Most of his brothers, but not all of them. Malamed shepirshu mimenu mitzvah Sanhedrin, to tell us that some of the Sanhedrin, some of his co-judges, they separated from him. They didn't hang out with him so much after. Amar Rav Yosef says, from here we see, Gadol Talmud Torah Yosef Matzelos Nefashos. Greater is Torah study than saving people's lives. Whoa.
I thought he got separated because he was wearing the sack. He was going to
To wear the sackcloth and to
where
daven.
Esther was and spending time there and
So that was before.
This
is after the whole story.
Oh.
This is after everything's done. Everyone's happy. The Jews are saved. But still, some of the Sanhedrin didn't want to hang out with Mordechai.
I know why.
And why?
Because he was right.
No.
Jealousy?
Yeah,
Well,
he was right.
No, but you see here, the Gemara doesn't say that reason. The Gemara says because Torah learning is greater than saving people's lives. So, now first of all, what is greater?
Except your own life.
What do you mean?
You save your own life comes before Torah.
So no, you even have to save someone else's life. So what does it mean? Let me explain what that means. There's a rule that Torah study is the greatest mitzvah. However, there's a rule. You only learn Torah in order to fulfill what it says. Right? You just don't learn Torah all day and don't put on tefillin. You don't learn about tefillin and not put on tefillin. Also, there's a rule that you're only allowed to stop Torah learning for a mitzvah if there's nobody else that can do a mitzvah. So if you're studying Torah, and God forbid, a bus drives by and it's on fire, and the fire department is taking care of it, and they have enough people, you should continue sitting and learn. Don't stop. The fire department has it under control. But if you see the bus burning and no one's helping, and you're sitting and learning, and you see outside the window, you're required to get up and save those people's lives. So you have to stop learning. You have to stop Torah study in order to save people's lives. So Mordechai did the right thing. He was the only one who could save the Jewish people. No one else, no other Jew was able to save them. It was him and Esther. They were the only ones who could do it. So, but what's a greater mitzvah? Torah learning. If you think about it, that's really powerful. You come home and you tell your spouse, tell your family, I just did today, I just saved 17 people from a burning bus. Wow, it's amazing. Wow. I just came back.
And then bragger.
Oh, you definitely shouldn't brag. But imagine
That is exciting, though.
imagine how good you're going to feel about yourself when you do it.
Right, but
Yeah,
then...
get up and tell them.
One second. But what if you do? What? Imagine you come home tonight and you say, I just spent 30 minutes learning Torah at Union Hill Congregation. You should feel better about that. That's a bigger mitzvah for sitting for 30 minutes studying Torah than it is spending 30 minutes to save someone's life. Now, if God forbid there was a bus on fire right now, we would all have to get up and save them. But it's a better mitzvah than studying Torah. So what do you say?
No, I was going to say, you're saying, it's saving someone's life in the moment, tell your wife, and the wife's job to...
Bring down the ego?
Bring down the man, keep him down, and you'll say,
So you
save someone's life, but how much Torah did you learn? And
There you go.
Well, look where Howard's sitting today.
And she's taking all the credit for it too.
I get all his mitzvahs.
So let's go. What was the reason that the Sanhedrin separated from Mordechai? So this is the kicker. Why was it that Mordechai was, out of all the Jews, he was the one, out of all the rabbis, he was the one who saved the Jewish people? So Hashem obviously made it happen to you that you had to stop your Torah learning in order to save the Jewish people. Torah learning is better, but you had to stop doing it. Hashem made it that Mordechai did the right thing. He had to save the Jewish people. 100% did the right thing. But Hashem made it come about that it was through Mordechai that the Jewish people had to be saved, and he had to stop doing his Torah learning. Same thing with that story with the great sages. The kids they didn't say Shema. Why? Because Hashem made it that through them, they had to go save the Jewish people, save this captive, and they couldn't say Shema. So there was something that happened to them. There was something that they were lacking that caused that they had to interrupt their Torah learning, that they had to interrupt that mitzvah. So, what were they saying here? These people that were carrying the bones of Yosef, like you were saying. So I was saying before that. That means our cases before. You couldn't go to Minyan because you were sick. Okay. It's not your fault. You don't have to go to Minyan. But why did Hashem make you sick that you couldn't go to Minyan? The sukkah blew down. You don't have to sit in the sukkah. You can't, whatever. You don't have a sukkah. Why did Hashem make it that your sukkah blew down? Why did Hashem put you in that situation? It must be, no, there was something lacking in your character. There was a little chisaron. You're not 100% perfect. Hashem makes things happen to you based on your actions. Hashem makes you lose a mitzvah because there's something lacking that you did. So the Sanhedrin says, Mordechai, right? One of the greatest Jews of all time. Oh, Hashem made it be him that he had to stop studying Torah to save the Jewish people? Maybe he's not. Maybe we should stay away from him a little bit. Obviously, Mordechai did the right thing, and he was a tzaddik, and we can't understand how great he was. It was a little something. So when these Jews, what were they saying when they said Lamani Gara? Why did we lose out from Pesach sacrifice? We couldn't bring the Pesach sacrifice. Lamani Gara. What do you mean you were exempt? So what they did is they thought about everything that they've done. Is there anything that we're lacking in that caused Hashem to make us not be able to bring the Pesach sacrifice? And when they analyzed their lives, they said there's nothing. There's no reason we should have been exempt, that a God should have made it come about that we shouldn't bring the Pesach sacrifice. So that's what they said, Lamani Gara, why should we lose out? Now these are the words of Rav Gedalia Shor. It says, Im yargishu es tainus Lamani Gara. If you feel, Lamani Gara, why do we lose out? Vim tia lahem hatshuka lahakravez Pesach. And they had this desire to bring the Korban Pesach. They were so forlorn that they lost an opportunity to do a mitzvah. Ad sheyavu b'tainus livnei Moshe. So they come in front of Moshe. He's the king. They came in front of the greatest Jew. That Hashem made it. Why did Hashem make it that we didn't merit to bring a mitzvah? So Hashem wanted it, like we said before, Pesach Sheni was only given to the Jewish people in the merit of these people. The merit that these people felt were lacking because we didn't get this mitzvah. So Hashem made it that by them complaining to Moshe, and Moshe asking Hashem that it should come. They were totally pure. They had nothing lacking in their character that they should have been exempt from bringing the Korban Pesach. On the contrary, and like we also mentioned, that they were the ones who were carrying the bones of Yosef. So that's why they went and analyzed, and they realized there's nothing that we should be lacking on. And he's telling us, Rav Gedalia Shor is telling us, that how do we view a mitzvah? How do we feel when we're sick one morning and we can't come to Minyan? Do we say, oh, finally I have a day off. I don't have to wake up at 5:30. Or do we say, oh, I'm not going to be able to say Amen and Yeheshmei Rabbah and Baruch Hu today. Oh, I'm going to lose out. Well, we can all answer the question to ourselves when that happens. How do we feel? How do we feel? And it tells us how much spirituality and connection to Hashem and our mitzvos are important in our life. How do we feel when we lose it? Do we feel like these great people that said, Lamani Gara, why should we lose out? Or do we feel like, whew, okay, I don't have to sit in the cold sukkah tonight, I can sit in my house, whatever it is. Or I can't, walk to shul because it's pouring rain and I have to stay home this Shabbos. How do we feel? Okay. Yes? Right. Okay, so that's one holiday. Second holiday, Lag BaOmer. It's Lag BaOmer. Tuesday, Wednesday? What's coming? Tuesday. Monday and Tuesday. So let's talk a little bit about the inner meaning of Lag BaOmer. This is also from Rav Gedalia Shor, Alan and our rabbi's uncle. He's much more than that, but that's our connection. It was special when I say his Divrei Torah. So Lag BaOmer, Rav Gedalia Shor says there are three parts of the Omer, and he says the last third begins on Lag BaOmer, this Monday and Tuesday. He also says that it says in the Sfarim, in the Kabbalistic Sfarim, that the light of Shavuos and the holiness of Shavuos you can already start to feel on Lag BaOmer. You don't have to wait till the day of Shavuos, but from Lag BaOmer already. Now, what do we do during the Omer, like we've mentioned in previous weeks? We are working to accept the Torah. How do we do that? We work by strengthening ourselves and studying Torah and subjugating ourselves to Torah. That's what Sfira is, the purpose of Sfira, of counting the Omer, and what we do during the Omer. But at the last third of the Omer, Lag BaOmer, we already start to feel that holiness of Shavuos, and there's a light of Shavuos already in the world. And he says, also, this was true in the times of the desert, because the manna started falling on Lag BaOmer. The manna in the desert, it says, started falling on Lag BaOmer. Now, what does the manna have to do with the Torah? So he quotes, it's a Gemara Medrash, remember. He says that the Lo Nitna HaTorah Lidrosh El La'ochle Haman. The Torah was only given to people who eat manna. Now, why is that? So I think there's two reasons in that. Someone just, Rav Nachum Katz just showed me this morning in Alshich. He says, well, first of all, manna is a spiritual food, right? When they ate the manna, there was no waste. They didn't have to go to the bathroom after. It just got totally absorbed in them. And the Alshich says when they ate the manna, they didn't have free will anymore. Because all they wanted to do was to study Torah. Because they were sustaining themselves from the spiritual food. All they wanted to do was connect to Hashem and to study Torah. Now, what we can take out for that is that when we study Torah, Torah is not just another discipline. It's not philosophy, it's not math, it's not history, English. All of those studies, you could be the biggest jerk in the world, you could be the biggest Russia, an evil person, you could be the biggest college professor, and you could be brilliant in those areas. Right? You don't have to be honest. There was a rabbi's in Ner Yisrael, I think it was his cousin or something, or brother, he passed away and he was a college professor. And the big praise that they said about him at his funeral was that he never plagiarized his work from another professor. Like that was something that was out of the ordinary, not plagiarizing as a college professor. But anyway, Torah is a spiritual study that a person has to have a refined character to be able to study. The sixth Mishnah, the sixth chapter in Pirkei Avos has a list of 48 things that one needs to acquire Torah, called the Memches Dvarim Torah Nikos Behem. And what people traditionally do in Sfira is every day they take one of them and they work on one of them. Now, if you notice, a lot of them make sense. How to become a Torah scholar. You have to listen. You have to understand. Right? You have to serve sages. A lot of very logical things about how to become a Torah scholar. But then you read, there are things there that seem to have nothing to do with Torah study. For example, anava, humility. Ema, fear. Farach hapayim, slow to anger. Leiv tov, a good heart. Kabbalas yisurin, accepting suffering. Samech bechalko, being happy with what you have. Ve'ena machzik tov alatzmo, you don't attribute greatness to yourself. Loving Hashem, loving other people. Distancing yourself from honor. What does that have to do with an intellectual pursuit? So the answer, I'm sure you know, is obvious. Because Torah is not just an intellectual pursuit. To be successful in Torah, a person also has to be working on his character traits, be working on his spirituality, to become close to Hashem. You know, it says the Torah is a mikveh. The Torah purifies the Jewish people. Because when we study Torah, we come in proximity to Hashem. We get close to Hashem. Similar to Yom Kippur being a mikveh, I think. And if we don't have these things, if we don't love our fellow Jews, and we don't work on being a servant of Hashem and working on our character traits to become better people, then one will not be successful in Torah. And I can tell you this, I've seen it myself. I've done much research into a group called Open Orthodoxy. And these are people that do not exhibit these traits, and their whole goal is to pervert the Torah to promote their agenda. And you read some of the Torah that they write, I'll call them tshuvas in quotes, responsa, to justify what they're trying to do to change the Torah based on their left-wing agenda.
Change the Torah.
That's what they try to do. But what they do is they use sources, and if you don't know better, it looks very impressive. Here's a 40-page paper quoting Talmudic passages, saying that you could do X, Y, Z.
Are they out of context?
Certain verses to promote their own agenda.
That's what Christians
So
do.
I want
They
to.
don't take the
But it's out of context.
right. They don't take the context
Right.
of the verse.
So this is.
Just take it out of context and use it for their
So
own
people think,
devices.
many people tell me, oh no, these guys know what they're talking about. They know what they're talking about. I want to tell you, it's some of the funniest things I've ever read. The absurdity of the things they write and the proofs. We should really make a whole class going through their stuff and just showing how ridiculous everything they say is. They mistranslate things. They compare apples to oranges. They take things out of context, like you say. If you would show it to any first-year student, like a 19-year-old boy in yeshiva, he would also probably laugh his head off at the stuff they were saying. It's a joke. But what they do is they appeal to people that are ignorant, that don't have a Torah background, and they fool them. My point is, that's just an aside, to say that in order to become a Torah scholar, one needs to also have the spirituality. And that's the idea that lo nitna haTorah el la'ochlei haman. The Torah was only given to people who eat manna, who have that spiritual desire. They were so holy when they were eating the manna, they just wanted to come close to Hashem. They were actually upset because they didn't have free will. Right? Imagine if you could just feel Hashem. Would you sin? That's like the angels. The angels can't. Technically they could, but they can't. It's so clear that Hashem is right here. They're not going to sin. It's beyond. Right? That's how the Jewish people felt when they were eating the manna. There's an apocryphal.
Is that a bad thing?
No, I would like that.
No, so
do the right thing.
the only thing is that you don't get any reward then because
It's not your
you didn't do it. So that's the downside.
So that's the downside, or do what I do and then not only don't I get rewarded, it's the opposite.
Well, if you don't have free will, you don't get anything. You're close to Hashem, but you didn't earn it. That's something we'll have in the world to come, but now we have to earn it. But just to bring out that idea, there's an apocryphal story told about Bertrand Russell, but probably didn't happen, but the meaning of the story, the lesson of the story is true. They say he was caught having an affair with one of his professor's wives, one of the fellow professor's wives. So they brought him in, and they said, he was a professor of ethics. Whoever it was. So they said to him, how could you do this? You're a professor of ethics. How could you commit adultery? So he says, let me ask you something. Is the geometry teacher a triangle? Meaning, I study what I study, I teach what I teach, but it doesn't have to impact me in any way. The Torah.
I say don't do it.
It never really happened by Bertrand Russell, but they say the story is true. They say a story like that about Aristotle also. Now, another aspect of the manna. That's one. Another aspect is bitachon, trust in Hashem. Because the manna, every day they weren't allowed to leave it over from one day to the next. It would get rotten. Every day they had to trust that Hashem was going to send them food.
Except on Shabbos, where they
right.
just take care of the
Right.
Why we have Lachem Mishnah.
Right. So, in order to get Torah to become acquire Torah, you have to have trust in Hashem, right? You might have to give up things. Maybe you can't work, 1 million hours a week and work from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. Just to become. I'm talking about obviously if you have to make a living, you have to do that, but just to become super wealthy so you can buy a yacht or something and buy a third house. No, I give up. I don't go for the best job. I can maybe go for a job that's I'm not going to make as much, but I'll have time to study Torah. I have bitachon. And there's thousands of people in Lakewood and many other cities across the world where they give up. I'm telling you, so many people that are so brilliant. Many of them actually do go into business later, and they do very well for themselves. But they give up a lot of money and a lot of prestige and power to sit and study Torah. They have trust in Hashem. There's Rabbi Ruderman, the founder of my yeshiva, was once told a student that he's jealous of these two boys, young married men in yeshiva, of their portion in the world to come. He says, "You're jealous of them? They're like in their mid-20s, early 20s. Like, why are you jealous of them? Like, you've been a Rosh Yeshiva for 50 years. You've had thousands of students, and you're jealous of these two boys?" He says, "I know their personal situation, and they learn Torah despite tremendous financial difficulty." And he says, the fact that they persevere and have trust in Hashem like that, and to be able to study Torah, he says, I'm jealous of their portion in the world to come. Talking about Ruderman in his 80s was the biggest... Okay, so I just want to conclude with one or two more ideas about this. Now, you know what else happened on Lag BaOmer? Besides the manna coming down, besides one thing is Rabbi Akiva's students stopped dying, there's another thing. It's also the yahrzeit of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Now, why is that significant? So we're talking about how Lag BaOmer begins the revelation of when the Torah was given. You know what Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai did? He revealed the Kabbalah, the Zohar. He was the writer of the Zohar. He revealed the hidden Torah. Now, what was interesting about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is that he lived in a cave, and Hashem provided him with food from a carob tree. Think about that, yeah. And a stream that flowed through.
It wasn't only him, though. It was
him and his son, right. So he had a trust in Hashem. He was La'ochle Aman. The Torah was specifically through him. Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, where he had a trust in Hashem, where his sustenance is coming from, specifically through him, that's where the hidden Torah came from, the Zohar and the Kabbalah. That's why it had to come through him. Now, no problem.
Thank you very much.
Have a good night.
Enjoy.
Take care.
I'll get some resume over to you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we're seeing the regular Torah was given to those who eat manna, and the hidden Torah also was given to those who eat manna. Now, just one more thing. We said that each day of Sfira, people work on a character trait. So on the 33rd day, according to some countings, the character trait to acquire Torah that people work on is Ohev es atochacha, love rebuke. Now, why loving rebuke? Because it's the day Rabbi Akiva's students died. Why did they die? Right, Rabbi Akiva lost 24,000 students. They didn't respect each other enough. Suppose specifically on that day, when they stopped dying for not respecting each other enough, on that day is when we have the thing to work on, loving rebuke. Because a person who loves rebuke can get along with others, he can recognize when he does things wrong, and when he makes mistakes. Now, Rav Gedalia Shor concludes and says that, what did Rabbi Akiva do? Can you imagine losing 24,000 students? You put your life, your soul, your sweat, your heart into these students, and they die. You know what he did? He started a new yeshiva with 5 students. And from those 5 students is all the Talmud that we have. All the oral Torah that we have is from Rabbi Akiva and his 5 students. He didn't give up. If Rabbi Akiva just said, if Rabbi Akiva gave up and threw in the towel, you could totally understand. You know how many people from the Holocaust had families that were destroyed, and they came to America and they started over. They didn't give up. They said, I'm going to keep the Jewish people going. Those are the Klosenberg Rebbe. Some of these Rebbe's lost like 14 children, like 10 children, and they started over. Can't imagine. So he says, we're about 2/3 done with Sfira, and we were supposed to be using Sfira to get ready for receiving of the Torah. So he says, let's say you didn't do anything. 2/3 are gone. Should we just give up? He says, no, don't give up. You still have 1/3 left, and he's telling everyone that, we didn't lose 24,000 students here. You wasted 2/3 of Sfira, but there's still time. He's saying it's never too late. As long as a person is alive, it's never too late. So we have 1/3 of Sfira left. So that's still time to get ready for the giving of the Torah. Okay, so we said Pesach Sheni. It said Lama Nigara. Why do we lose out? And we talked about the importance of feeling how mitzvahs should be important to us. We should feel bad if we can't fulfill the mitzvahs. And we talked about BaOmer and how it's the beginning of the getting of the Torah, because it was only given to those who have mana, because we have to have a spiritual food, get close to Hashem. And we also said about trust in Hashem is integral to success in Torah study. And thanks for the beer.